Hi, my name is Pat, and you are listening to the I Used to Think podcast, a podcast about the stories of people who are brave enough to change their mind. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. Today's guest is Stephen. Stephen is the founding pastor, one of the founding pastors of the church that I currently attend in Orange County. He has since gone on to run his own leadership coaching nonprofit business, coaching both businesses and individuals, as well as his own ministry, which he gets into the episode. If any of you are interested in Stephen's ministry or reaching out to him regarding his consulting/leadership coaching business, feel free to click the links in the description. Hope you enjoy the episode. Stephen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Pat. Glad to be here.
I will let you do the little intro, kind of what we were talking about, because I feel you explained it the best. But what is it you're passionate about, and what is Stephen all about?
Oh gosh, that's a different question from, what is your CV? How would you introduce yourself to somebody? Let's see, big picture. I spent 15 years in the business world, ended up in sales and tech, sort of matrix managing a global company's resources to deliver voice and data services all over the world to international companies. So we'd connect all their offices together, help them run applications. This was before the internet was robust enough or secure enough to be able to do things online. And so we would provide private network services all over the world. And that was a lot of fun. So I was in kind of sales, business development for 15 years. And then I always knew I wanted to go into ministry, but it took me a little while to get to where I went to seminary and pursued full-time ministry. So, but I did that after about 15 years of the business world, went to seminary, became a pastor, and served as a pastor at two churches, one Redeemer in Orange County, where it predated your presence there. And then for 14 years, I was in San Diego pastoring a church that's now known as Harbor City Church. And so I was a pastor there. And then about 2 years ago, just a little over 2 years ago, I stopped pastoring that church and launched a leadership coaching business. And so now I coach leaders in business. I coach leaders in the church and the nonprofit space. And I've got a significant presence where I coach a lot of people in the LGBTQ plus world. And so a lot of my clients are gay, and God has, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about that on this podcast, but God's done a lot in my own heart and soul. And the church has horribly failed in that its relationship with the LGBT community. And we're starting to see the tide turn in our little part of San Diego. And in the midst of that, I started another ministry called Refocused Relationships, and that's designed for parents of LGBTQ plus loved ones. It's really trying to help them realize that they don't have to choose between loving Jesus and loving their kid. And so we have a gathering where we come together and just try to provide support, encourage people to actually see the heart and the face of God, and to know how to love their kids in a way that is both honoring to the Bible and honoring to the spirit that inspired the Bible. So yeah, and I'm in the process of writing a book. And the working title is "What If God Was the Dad I Came Out To?" And it's designed to imagine what it would be if God was the earthly father that you had if you were coming out, and how would God respond based on what we know from Scripture and how he interacts with people, what we know about the gospel. How would God respond in the initial conversation? And then how would God respond in subsequent conversations to his kids if they were gay? So, yeah, so that's a lot of things that I'm involved with, a lot of things I'm doing.
I'll give a little bit of my side of the story of how I first met you, I guess, in a sense, was when you came to guest preach at Redeemer. And I had started attending the church. I think I was only there for about half a year. And I think what had happened was there was a Christmas party and the entire staff got COVID, and you were called last minute to guest preach on a December Sunday.
Right. Yep, that's right. I think I got a call. I think it might have been Thursday or Friday. And it was
Okay.
like, Stephen, our entire bench is out. Josh is out. Adam's out. I mean, it was just down the road and I think 42 people got COVID at this Christmas party.
Oh man.
And so, yes, they were, can you come? No one's going to be there because all of not just our staff, but so many of the families that were there also got COVID. And yes, so I got the call.
I remember thinking, wow, this guy is the last choice. So this is what we've got.
I love it. Yes, indeed. That's exactly it. It's that reminds me of it's Second Samuel. Yeah, Second Samuel. It's when David gets called and Samuel shows up. And today you're going to see the guy who's going to replace Saul, right? And so he goes to Jesse, and God's that's the one. And he's like, hey, I'm the prophet. Jesse, who you got? And he's, oh, well, here are my sons. And first son comes, and God's, that's not the one. Second son, like 7 sons come, and God's, nope, that's not the one. And then Samuel's like, do you have anybody else? And Jesse's, well, I got my youngest son, but he's over with the donkeys in the baggage or something. And sure enough. So yeah, so this was me. I was in the baggage with the donkeys when Josh reached out to me and asked me to preach.
I think the analogy is perfect though, because I remember after your sermon, the only thing I was thinking is I need to go talk to that guy after.
Oh.
And that's why I approached you, and your sermon impacted me. I don't even know your name. I don't know where you came from. You just appeared out of nowhere. And it's a perfect example of, I don't necessarily remember what you said, but I remember how I felt afterwards. And I think I asked you to pray for me, and we just connected. But ever since then, the second thought was, he needs to be on the podcast. And so that's why you're here. Nice.
I think what you just said I don't remember what you said, but I remember how I felt is something that the heady side of Christianity would do well to understand and embrace. And I'm as heady as anybody else that I know. So I'm as into the depths of theology and understanding how everything works and explaining all kinds of the bits and pieces of all of the Bible and theology. And yet the goal of all of it, 1 Timothy 1:5 is love from a pure heart, a sound mind, and a clear conscience. And the experience that we have sitting in church, hearing sermons, the experiences that we have, even this is why music is so powerful, is it because it creates experiences for us that they don't go beyond, they don't, because they include how we think, but they incorporate how we feel too. And well, shoot, what you just testified is that you remember how you felt. That stayed with you. And that's been, I don't know how many years it's been, but
that must have been December of 21.
Yeah. So
it's been a while.
Almost 2 years. Yeah. So I don't know. That's another well that we could dive into and mine the gold in, to mix metaphors.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you introducing yourself. We will get into the icebreaker. And I had disclosed earlier that I did not prepare at all for this icebreaker. So this just came to my mind.
I'm not sure if I should be thankful or not that you didn't prepare one. I'm going to put my money and my chips on. I'm thankful because this is going to be a kinder icebreaker to me. But we'll see. We'll see. You can ask me when we're done.
So today's icebreaker is, at the beginning of church service, when they have the meet and greet time, what feelings do you have right before, and what usually plays out when you have to turn to your neighbor and say good morning and all that stuff?
Wow. So that time is the most hated time of life for the introverts in the room. And I know this because I've talked to people about this. I've talked to introverts about this moment in the service. My wife is an introvert.
Okay.
I am a raving extrovert.
Okay.
So I have learned to listen and to understand and to hold their angst about these times. And yet I don't share it.
Okay.
And so for me, I think just because of the way I'm wired, I have my own personal feelings about that time. And yet, because I know that there are people who are really triggered. They hate that time. I feel in some ways I carry some of their angst,
Yeah.
especially if they're with me.
Right.
And so if I know I'm with an introvert, I know, oh, I need to make sure that this person doesn't feel abandoned, to
Mm.
make sure that I'm not leaving them off on their own. Because I would literally go and talk to 8 people
Okay.
during
Okay.
that 3 minute period of time. At the same time, I've also, I have used, sometimes I don't immediately make eye contact with somebody. And so I'll feel that junior high school, I'm sitting with my back to the wall on the dance floor and nobody is around. And so then I'm, oh, okay, well, I don't mind being here. I don't mind standing here and having no one to talk to, but I could just go get coffee. And if I have something in my hand, then it's a little bit easier. And I don't look as awkward if I'm standing there by myself, observing the fact that nobody's talking to me. And so yeah, I don't know exactly.
To your
So
point about holding something while you're talking, or if you're by yourself, I found that to be so true. I could be holding an empty plastic cup,
yeah,
and there's just I feel confident, my shoulders back. I'm just like
yeah,
I'm vibing.
that's it. That's it. You've got something that you can do, something that's occupying you. I think it's because we don't know where to put our hands. If
Good
our hands
point.
don't have somewhere to go, then we feel awkward and then we start conscious of it. And yeah, it makes it worse. So
Yeah. My wife is also an introvert, and I know for a fact she hates that time. Once in a while, I can tell after church she wants to leave. And I've seen memes on Instagram where it's the extrovert spouse after church and the introvert spouse.
yeah,
And the
yeah.
extrovert spouse is like, give me a second, I'm just on my seventh conversation and then I'll leave.
Yes. Well, when you combine my personality with the fact that I was a pastor, yeah,
Mm.
we just started taking multiple cars. And so and
Oh,
she would
okay.
just leave whenever she wanted to. And I was cool with that. No big deal. She didn't have to be a pastor. That was my job, not hers. And
Right.
so yeah, yeah. So that's how we handled the
That's good.
the desire to leave early or not leave early.
Awesome. Well, to get into the episode, you sent me some great stuff and I'll let you get into it. But Stephen, what is your I used to think statement?
I used to think that if someone was under my authority or that I had responsibility for, then I needed to control them because everything that they did was a reflection on me.
Mm.
Yeah. And I don't think that way anymore. Now I think that everyone is on their own journey and that the best way for me to love the people around me, the best way for me even to influence people is by honoring their agency and being curious about whatever path they're on.
Is that phrase honoring their agency? Is that something that you came up with?
It is. It
Okay.
is through many toils and pains and brokenness in relationship. I've really struggled with this a lot. And I didn't even know it was a struggle
Mm.
forever. I just thought, well, of course, yeah. If you're part of my family, if you're my children, if you're my wife, even, or if you're on staff underneath me, if you're a representative leader in my church, then everything that you do is a reflection on me. And the amount of, yeah, we can dive into this, but yeah, it was as I was realizing
Mm.
that the negative effects of that attitude and that conviction I think that I had, I was trying to figure out what's the opposite of this? What's
Mm.
the opposite of being controlling? What's the opposite of being so concerned that other people's actions or thoughts will negatively reflect on you? Okay, so don't do that. But then what could you do? That's what you have to take off. But what do you put on?
Mm.
Ephesians 4, Romans 6, the old self, the new self. We got to take off the old self, put on the new self. And Colossians 3 says the same thing. And what is that putting on activity that I could occupy myself with so I'm not just not doing something?
Mm.
I don't want to just focus on not doing the wrong thing. I want to focus on what is the right thing. And it took a long time, years, before I was able to settle on that phrase of
Mm.
honoring the agency of others.
You hinted on this in your email when we were first discussing what you could talk about, but I'm hearing implications for, yeah, parenting, business, literally every facet of life. I'm curious, what was that? Was there a moment where that realization first began to hit, where it first began to sink in? And what was that moment?
I think that there were signals, the minor alarms, things in my soul that just didn't feel right at times
Mm,
for a while, where I would know that I was leaning in to a relationship. It could have been a work relationship. It could have been somebody who works for me, or it could have been in the family where, I mean, parents feel this way all the time where their kids think something or do something and they're, well, we don't think you should do that.
yeah,
That's not a good
right.
thing. That's not good for you. And this is good because now I'm thinking, because what my therapist says is, when did you first feel this way? Do you remember the first time you felt this way? And I'm thinking, when was the first time I felt this way? And I remember having a conversation with a good friend of mine back in, I was in college, he's graduated, and I was following a pastor, a preacher. His name was Al Martin, this
Mm,
Reformed Baptist preacher from, I think he was in New Jersey. And he would preach in incredibly passionate ways. And he used this phrase. He's, okay, I'm going to preach about this, and then I'm going to press it into your conscience.
huh.
And so, and for him, what that meant was he would teach about a subject and then he would apply it in a way that would cause you to want to put it into practice.
Okay.
And but he used that phrase, press it into your conscience. And I remember thinking, ooh, that's so cool. And what I didn't realize was happening was I was beginning to think that I had a responsibility to not only share things with people, but to push them so that they would react in the way that I thought they should.
Mm,
And I think, and I don't know Al Martin at all, never met him, never knew anybody that went to his church. So I have no idea. I would assume that I misunderstood and misapplied his phrase, but I began to be concerned not only about what I was sharing, but also how people were reacting to it. And I was paying attention and felt, if the Bible isn't just trying to get us to think rightly, but it's trying to get us to do rightly or be rightly, then I should be concerned about how people do and be based on conversations that we have.
mm,
And I think that got mixed up in a twisted way and kind of got tangled up as a knot in my soul, where I began to not just teach people, but want to call them to behave in a way that would be commensurate with what I was teaching. Or we'd have a conversation about, I mean, it could be about dating, right? What are the appropriate limits of physicality in dating?
mm,
And it wasn't enough for me just to talk about what I thought. I'd want to really press in and hold people accountable. And some of that's appropriate, some of it's good, some of it's wise, but I think that what was going on inside of me was, if they don't respond the way that I think they should, then somehow either I've failed,
mm,
I haven't explained it the best way or the right way,
mm,
or that there's just more work to be done. And what that produced was longer conversations, because now I don't just need to share with you, but I understand that you're convinced that what I'm saying is right. I
yeah.
need to make sure that I'm hearing and seeing that you're acting in the ways that show that you agree with me. And I think that what that began to feel in its worst expressions was squeezing on someone and holding them
Hmm.
and confining them in ways that would really leave them feeling either, I'm going to agree with you, or I'm not sure that we can be in a relationship because you're not going to let me go.
Mm,
And so, I mean, you could imagine that if you're married to someone this, or the or someone this is your father, that could get really challenging, especially when the guy's a pastor and when the guy thinks that what he's doing has chapter and verse to go
hmm.
along with it.
Right. Everything's backed up by some evidence.
Right. You're not arguing with me, Pat. You feel free to disagree. I mean, if you want, but you're disagreeing with God here.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, this is, and I was I wasn't trying to be manipulative. And I'm not trying to justify what I did, but I'm just trying to say I wasn't trying to control people. I really thought I was encouraging them to understand how God thinks and how God feels about what they should be thinking, doing, and being. And
Right.
so I really thought that I was loving them well, to
Mm.
hold them to these standards and to be, I would say another phrase I've come up with is over present in their decision making.
Oh, interesting. Over present.
And
Yeah, I was curious. You started it with the Al Martin example. What was your trajectory in life as far as, I guess, career at that time? Did you want to be a lawyer? Did you want to be a pastor?
ooh, that's interesting. I remember I became a Christian when I was 16, almost 17. So I was a junior in high school,
Okay.
junior in high school. And I really did become very passionate, and I wanted to help everybody understand Jesus and the way that
Yeah.
he had changed my life. I mean, it was so glorious and so wonderful, and I had so much peace and joy that I just couldn't contain myself. I wanted everybody to know. And and it was kind of neat because I'd show up at church and I just ask questions. What does that mean? Huh? How does that work? Do women know that this verse is in the Bible? Are they okay with this? I just read this. How is this possible? What and and the people at the church I went to were just, God connected me to some people that were really patient and very willing to
Mm,
share and answer my questions and talk to me about the Bible. And it was an amazing time. And I learned pretty quickly. I'd be sitting in a group and somebody would ask a question, and I'd be like, hey, I just started this thing and I don't know anything, but I asked that question a couple weeks ago, and here's the verse that they showed me.
okay.
And the person would be, wow, that's super helpful. Thank you. And I'm like, no problem. Cool. And that started happening more and more and more. And so by the time I got to college, I knew I wanted to be a pastor.
Mm,
And I was in an environment that was very conducive to going into pastoral ministry. And so when I interacted with Al Martin's material, I very much was on the road to becoming a pastor, really wanted to be a pastor and really wanted to teach. I mean, I had a huge passion to teach and share the gospel, share the Bible with anybody that would listen, and even with people who didn't want to listen.
mm.
So yeah, so that was, I mean, so even though I had 15 years of business experience, I knew the whole time that I wanted to be a pastor and that I was heading in that direction.
Did you see a certain quality in your relationships at that time, specifically, I guess, say friendships, for example, knowing that this characteristic about you, I don't know if you identify as control or over presentness. I think you mentioned no one really called you out on it. I guess it was more of just a result of consequences, but how did you see, I guess, your friendships evolve and kind of grow over time?
I think at that point, most of my world was within the church. And so most of my friends were Christians, and I was really zealous. And so I think most people thought about me as just, oh, he's incredibly zealous and he's got more zeal than knowledge for sure. But even as I was getting more and more knowledgeable, I think God was very kind and gracious to me
Mm,
and gave me friends that I probably didn't deserve.
mm,
I had friends that were, I guess they were, a lot of them were older, and they were just, hey, we love your passion for understanding things, and so we're just going to keep exploring truth with you and keep exploring the Bible with you. And so I guess, and I think that a lot of other people just thought that I knew more than they did, and so they were just like, well, I guess this is just
he's
what
got the gift.
yeah, he's got the gift. And I think, I mean, there's also another dynamic here where I actually thought I didn't understand the difference between spiritual maturity and gifting.
Hmm.
I thought that I was incredibly mature because I was so passionate about the Bible and so wired to understand theology and the scriptures and memorize things. And I didn't realize that a lot of that was just spiritual giftedness that I
Hmm.
shouldn't expect everybody else to be able to emulate. And so I assumed that anybody that didn't do what I was doing or didn't agree with me, I just thought they were stupid or dumb, or I thought they were just uninformed. And if they could just understand what I understood, they would be just me.
Hmm.
And I have come to understand how radically immature, disgustingly immature that is and was. But back then I was so convinced that Jesus was going to use me to save the world that I just couldn't, I don't know. I could not stop and see my brokenness.
Hmm. As you're speaking, I see so much of myself in this, I guess,
Okay.
caricature. But this story is
Cheers.
about this story is about you. But I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, wow, this is giving me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Um, Something that I wrote down that I'll bring up, some thoughts that came up as I was reading your email. Do you mind if I read some of the wording in the
No, go
email?
ahead. Sure.
So you said here, let's see. You mentioned honoring the agency of others. Oh, and you mentioned now I recognize that everyone is on their own journey, and I can best care for them and even influence them by being curious about the path that they are on and the process they use to make decisions. My mind first went to a realization that I had recently about, I guess I have found that throughout my life, I have taken things very personally.
Mm.
So somebody can be making a simple observation about my life, and I'll twist the wording or the phrasing to be a personal attack. And so one example I thought of is I just started a new business and I'm really excited about it. I'm working with somebody to get everything off the ground.
Mhm.
And so naturally, when people have been asking me, Pat, how are you doing? What's new? I'm telling them about this business. And I would say probably 8 or 9 times out of 10, the first comment out of the other person's mouth is some kind of doubt. Not necessarily a criticism, but just kind of either a question or a doubt. And so recently I had a guy say, like, are you sure the market's good right now? Things are kind of
Wow.
iffy.
Yeah. Yeah.
2008 happened and I was running a business at that time. And after that conversation, I think I finally got to a point where I thought, okay, I'm obviously not taking these conversations well, and I need to change the way I am
Mm.
receiving them. Otherwise, I'm
Yeah.
just going to get really discouraged.
Yeah.
And so I came to this realization that other people will project their fears onto me, especially if they've experienced a similar situation.
That's worth writing down if you haven't done that yet. Other people will project their fears onto me, especially if they've experienced something negative.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
good.
It was a big realization and has helped me because I thought, okay, if I'm my fuel is other people affirming this endeavor, I'm not gonna make it another week. It
Yeah.
in the
Yep.
end, I just gotta do it regardless.
Yep.
And so that also helped me with, I feel something that I've seen in you so far through this conversation of empathy, of okay, I can turn that around to being this person went through a very real experience where they felt pain. And that was their first thought or reaction when I was telling them my story. And so now I could feel empathy for them and ask them, like, oh, what is your experience running a business? What is your
Hmm.
experience dating long distance? What is your experience getting a new pet? Why are you so concerned that the dog is going to rip up all my furniture? Well, it's because your dog ripped up all your furniture the first time you brought it home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, that's something that came to mind when you sent the email.
The what I guess what's hitting me right now is an overlapping circle maybe with what you just said, and that's that for a long, long time, I was never able to let anybody joke about me
Hmm. Wow.
because I would think there is some truth in what they're saying. And I need to make sure they understand that no, that's not how I think, or no, that's not what I meant, or no, that's not what. And so someone would make a joke, just give me a hard time, ribbing me for something. And
Right.
I would take it, wait, hold on a minute. If that's what you think, let's talk. And you'd be, oh, wow. All right. Yeah. Cool. Good. All right. So you're okay.
Yeah.
And I am also in the process of learning to laugh when people joke about me. And
Hmm.
I've seen people do that. And I've wondered how they could possibly do that when this person, I've projected my own stuff onto other people experiencing this and watched them just laugh and
Right.
thought, how free, how amazingly free that person just appeared because they just laughed when the person made a joke about them.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. So I guess I'm there with you in terms of taking personally things that are said in my direction,
Hmm.
whether it's a joke about me or it's someone confessing their own fears or yeah. I mean, what I would hear, what I would love to say to you right now would be they are probably meaning, Pat, I love you so much
Hmm.
and care so much that you succeed that I want to somehow vocalize a fear that could happen, and maybe you can prevent that from happening.
Right.
That's probably what they mean when they're saying what they're saying, because they want you to succeed and they wouldn't want you to do anything that might not succeed. And so they want to help protect you from what could possibly be in the future.
It's amazing how that simple reframing could just save me so much mental gymnastics for the next 3 days.
I mean, yeah. And as long as your business isn't anything in real estate, I think you're going to be great, Pat. And I have no idea what your business is. I'm just assuming because you brought up 2008 that it might have had something to do with the real estate market than what you're doing. And so I was just giving you a hard time right now.
Yeah, no comment on that. We'll talk later.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, I had to learn. I mean, honestly, it's from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Did you ever read that book?
No.
So it's a set of books, but the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was the first one, science fiction, Douglas Adams. And in the universe of these books, there's an item called a babel fish. And if you took a babel fish and you put it inside your ear, you stuck it in your ear, then it would live translate any language in the galaxy,
Okay.
in the universe, so that you could talk with any alien species you ever wanted to if you had a babblefish stuck in your ear.
Okay.
And I remember playing, there was a computer game, an interactive fiction computer game, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Then there was the book. And I remember just being compelled by this world for a while and intrigued by this babblefish. And as I've learned, I've had some really hard relationships with people where no matter what I said or did, it felt like it wasn't good enough.
Hmm.
Which right now I'm connecting. This is probably why I have struggled so much to want to press things into people's consciences and control and manipulate them, because connected to this is that it's very hard for me to be satisfied with other people because I can
Hmm.
always see things that they could have done better. And I've got the hardware and the firmware and the software experience to produce that in me. So, but I remember, yeah, I've had relationships where I've literally thought I need to put a babblefish in my ear.
Hmm.
I know what this person is saying. I know how what this person is saying makes me feel,
Yes.
but what is this person meaning when they say this to me? And my whole life, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm talking about, I mean, the relationship that's most salient in this is the relationship I had with my dad.
Hmm.
And I had to learn that when my dad would talk to me about, I get a 98 on a test and he'd be like, oh man, you were so close to 100. What happened?
Yeah.
I know how that made me feel. And it took me years. I think I was in my mid 20s when I realized that, oh, what my dad means is, Stephen, I love you so much. And I think so highly of your gifts and talents that I want to do everything I possibly can to make you as good as you can be. The hard part was that he never said that,
Yeah.
or it was very rare. There were times. I mean, well, and as things got older, I actually began to talk to him about some of these things. And
Hmm.
but first, before I could engage with him in conversation, I had to do that translating work. And it's kind
Right.
of what's the Google Translate app where you live real time,
Oh,
like that's what the
yes. Yeah.
Babblefish. So we have an app now that does what the Babblefish does in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But yeah, just trying to ask yourself that question based on what I know about this person. This is what they're saying to me. This is our relationship. What might they mean that would be consistent with all of my other experiences of this person?
Right.
That's been a really helpful step. It's a set of steps for me to, and it's enhanced my growth in this area of not being controlling and manipulative in my relationships, because it really does, just the extra question of not only what are you saying, but what are you meaning? Not just what are you saying, but what are you feeling that's producing what you're saying? And if I
Right.
could ask that deeper question, I might be able to Yeah, I might be able to actually respond to what you mean instead of what I think I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah,
I
that's
know
just
for me, go ahead.
sorry, that's just a big part of what it means to be curious about the path that someone else is on. So that's the
Yes.
tie-in with what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So,
The first example that comes to my mind with the curiosity, and because you brought up family, which is such a powerful and difficult area of life for
mm-hmm,
everybody, is
mm-hmm.
my younger sister, who in many ways has followed my exact footsteps. We went to the same high school. We both
Okay.
went to UCLA.
Go Bruins, class
Oh,
of
that's right.
96. Yeah,
I
class
totally
of
forgot.
96. Cheers.
Okay. So that's the third subconscious reason I have you on the podcast.
Yes, exactly. That's right.
And we were different majors, but we both ended up going to the same Christian fellowship, which is RUF.
Okay.
And she's actually moving to Orange County soon. And I don't think I
Oh,
mentioned
wow.
this to you, but she will be working with Derek Rishmawi.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
Amazing. So
a
with
lot of
RUF.
parallels. Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
shoot. Amazing.
And we've always had a great relationship. And as we've gotten older, she will naturally text me or call me and ask me, "What do you think of this situation?
Mhm.
What based on your experiences in college or starting your career, what would you do?" And I took that as the green light to just tell her everything, give her advice and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
knowing her personality, I mean, she's also a very curious person. So she received it, she took it in and
Mm.
everything so well. But just recently, and I'd be curious to see if she noticed, but on a phone call the other day, she called me about a difficult situation. And all the ideas and advice was just rising up in me, right? I was just
Yes.
like
Yeah.
waiting
I
to
know the feeling. Uh-huh.
spill it all out.
Right.
And she told me the situation. I was okay, okay. Do you want some advice? And there was a pause, and she was sure. And then I told her. And then I thought back to the conversation, and I thought she's never been the kind of person to say that was annoying or you
Mhm.
mansplained that way too hard to me.
Older
But
brother
even for
explained. Yeah.
myself,
Older sibling explained. It might
yeah,
not have been a sex thing. It might just been an older sibling thing.
right, yeah, exactly. And I thought, at least for myself, that felt freeing because I was able to have the self-awareness to be okay. Because I asked that question, I didn't have to feel guilty afterwards that she actually didn't want to hear it.
And she gave you permission.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Asking for that
Yeah.
permission.
Yep.
And so,
I
yeah,
love that.
learning to
So
be curious.
that's a really good step. One of the other things that I've learned in this journey is the power of zooming in.
Mm,
I realized there were things in my life that if I rated on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe I'm at a 3. And I wasn't exactly sure how to get to 4. And so then I changed the scale and I was like, what if I was on a scale of 1 to 100? And so maybe out of 100, I'm at 30. And I don't know what 40 looks like, but I think 31 is within reach.
what does the scale represent?
It's just if 100 is perfect or 10 is perfect,
Oh, okay.
like, and 1 is awful, the worst thing ever in the world. If I'm a 3 out of 10, instead, now I'm a 30 out of 100
Mm,
because now the next step isn't 40, it's 31,
mm.
or it's 30.5, or it's 30.00082. You know what I mean? And so I feel like I guess I'm about to judge you, Pat. I hope that's okay.
You
Um,
have permission.
I feel like you simply asking her, do you want some advice, is a beautiful step. It's
Mm.
just it's not a huge step. It was a big step for you.
Yeah, I get what you're
It's a
saying.
big step for you, but it would be amazing for you to say, well, what have you thought about this so far?
Hmm.
How long have you been thinking through this? Just
Right.
ask more curious questions before you even offer advice to find out. Because one of the things that I learned from lots and lots of people who listened to me and then just went off, they were
Mm.
just waiting for me to be done talking so that they could go live their life. And that
Oh, man.
includes probably my kids. It's all right. Well, as soon as dad's done, then I'll hopefully be able to leave. And I think there was an unconscious strategy of if I just start to agree, then maybe he'll stop sooner.
Oh,
If I argue, and this is just some of the brokenness that I didn't even know was happening,
mm.
because what I took was, oh, if you don't argue with me, then you're agreeing with me, right? if you're not, then this must mean then, because you didn't offer any sort of alternative explanation or argument, that you now agree with me. And so my understanding is that we are in cahoots and we're going to walk together in this, right? Which, oh man, God save me. But what's more important than, because really what I was doing is I was telling them what I thought they should do. And instead, I should try to figure out, I mean, it's what God says to Hagar, when everything falls apart for her, when everything explodes and she's on a death march as a pregnant woman, 120 miles to Egypt. She's not going to make it. She's going to die.
Yeah.
And God found her. God found her at the well. And what does he say? He says, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from? And where are you going?
Oh, that's so good. Yeah.
So it'd be, sis, hey, where have you come from? What's led you to this place?
Right.
And what are you thinking? What's important to you? Because what I've learned is that, and this is now what I think, what's so much more important than whatever I think is right and wrong is for me to understand the path that someone else is on, for me to understand what is the decision that they seem to be thinking they need to make, and how are they thinking about that decision? What are the options in their mind? What are they struggling with?
Yeah.
I mean, there's connections to the sales world back from business time, where we were always taught, don't do unpaid consulting, which is what happens when you answer questions without understanding why someone's asking. People would love for you to give them all the advice in the world so they can do the right things without having to pay you anything. And salespeople are so interested in telling everybody what they know because they think that's going to get them the sale. And there's a lot of people, at least for me, I am a person who used to think that what was most important for me was to tell everybody everything I thought, because I was giving them the divine perspective on whatever situation they were in. And when I would stop and actually listen to hear, it would become very clear to me that the question that I thought they were asking is nowhere near the path that they're actually on, and that I needed to do more work to understand that path so that I could actually speak to them where they were, not where I just assumed they were.
Right. You're getting at something that I get pretty passionate about, which is, I guess, what true sales is. And this is something that I've just had to learn through experience. So to answer your question from before, yes, the new business is real estate related.
So there you go. And
which is, I think appropriately, people have fears and comments about that.
Right.
But
because they love you and they don't want you to fail. That's the reframing.
Yeah. That's what the Babelfish is telling me.
That's right.
And I'm passionate about this because, I mean, even before I started my career, naturally, people had a negative connotation of sales, right? Sales is the old-fashioned guy with a briefcase. He's got all the products in there. Yeah. And he's going to go through each product and tell you why it's good, and then close the sale and done, on to the next one. And I've come to see that sales is figuring out what other people need. Yeah. And then providing their needs. Sales is service. Yes. It's love. Right. And I guess I would frame that as true sales, or I don't know, something like that. Yeah. And so, oh man, I lost my train of thought. Oh, there's this video. There's a video on YouTube. So I think they made a movie off this guy, right? The Wolf of Wall Street. Oh, okay, yeah. I think he's known as the best salesman ever. Okay. And so there's a YouTube video of the actual guy the movie was based off of. And he was on one of those talk shows. And the host asked him, sell me this pencil. And so he got a regular number 2 pencil and gave it to him. And he started off by saying, the misconception is that I have a perfect phrase or a perfect quote to sell you this pencil. And he says, watch what I actually do. And so he was role playing with the person next to him. And essentially he just asked a bunch of questions in a row. Are you in the market for a pencil? Yes or no? What kind of pencil are you looking for? What does the perfect pencil look like to you? Mm-hmm. When do you use pencils? how do you use pencils? And they answered all these questions. And then he said, okay, based on your questions, I now know whether or not you need this pencil and whether I should sell it to you.
Wow.
And I thought that was so powerful because even on a more personal level, everything that we've been talking about, in
Yeah.
the end, it's figuring out where's someone going, what do they want,
Yeah.
and helping them
Yeah.
along that journey.
I have another book that I'm just beginning to work on, and it's called Impact Fluency.
Hmm.
And it's a phrase that captures something very, very deep. And it's trying to help people to become fluent, to understand the impact of what they do.
Hmm.
And it tends to be,
Wow.
I use this a lot with my clients in business, but also in the nonprofit world. You need to understand the impact of the product or service that you offer. You need to understand the problems that it solves. You need to understand the way that it makes people feel better about life, feel secure, peace. I mean, I don't think I know anything about the real estate business that you're going to go into, but you want to think through, how do you make people whole? How do you give
Hmm.
people peace? How do you help people to not experience anxiety and fear?
Hmm.
And that, when you can see your work in that way, in terms of the impact, it revolutionizes. And I honestly think that's God's perspective on work.
Yeah.
That's the reason that we work, is because God wants us to help him to turn this world into heaven, where we have a fabric of society where everyone is held up,
Hmm.
where it's strong enough to catch anyone who falls through, where everyone is actively serving the community. The community service isn't you feeding the homeless. Community service is you going to work and doing your work with excellence and integrity. That
Yeah.
is the best way that you will serve your community. And it's all tied in with what you're talking about seeing sales as service.
Hmm.
So that's another topic, but one
Um,
I'm also passionate about.
I was curious going into some of the other realms that your new perspective has changed. How do you see this in family?
Yeah, well, I think that now one of my get curious phrases is, "Oh, that's what I try to say a lot. Oh, I have a child who does this. Oh, I have a wife who thinks this. Oh, I have," it's just, it puts me in that mode of, oh, I've just discovered something. So
Hmm.
instead of being triggered by it, instead of it thinking, oh man, if he, she, if they think this, then that reflects on me. It's, isn't this interesting? I have a member of my family who thinks this, who's doing this, who
Hmm.
wants this, who, and then it's, how interesting is that? I want to know more about that. And so that sense of curiosity, of feeling my family members are mines that are full of gold. And it, well, I mean, I guess I could use the proverb. The proverb says that the soul of a man is a deep well, and the wise can draw it out.
Hmm.
And that's my posture now.
Hmm.
It's one of curiosity. It's one of, I want to know. There are near infinite reasons, experiences, decisions that everyone makes that precede any given decision that they're going to make in a
Hmm.
day, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember, I think it was Andy Stanley who said, if you ever tell somebody, I don't understand how you could do something, you're saying something about yourself, not about them.
Huh.
If I say, I don't understand why you think this way, I don't understand how you could do this,
Yeah.
I'm saying something about me. I don't understand. And
Hmm.
the implication is, you must be an idiot because you're thinking in a way that I
Right.
would
Right.
never think, or that
Right.
no rational person ever think. But in fact, it's, I'm admitting that I don't know you well enough to understand what has led you to make these decisions.
Hmm.
And when I have that posture, I think I become a person, a friend, a dad, a husband who is patient, eager to learn,
Hmm.
and is able to ask gentle, curious questions. I think that's the posture that all of us need from some people in our lives.
Mm.
I think that some of us have respond well to some kind of drill sergeant kind of people. Some people have those. David Goggins, if you ever watch David Goggins, he'd get you up off the couch and get you out working out and stuff. There are people that will demand you to be the greatest version of yourself in ways
Right.
that are very forceful and come at you. And I think that some of us respond well to that. I know that I do at times, but I think no matter how you're wired, everybody needs someone who's willing to be gently curious with them,
Mm.
to ask them like, hey, what is going on? What do you think about this? Hey, what's the thought process here? Not in a condemning way, but in a
Yeah.
way that really wants to discover. And I've had a coach who's now a dear friend of mine. His name's Al Dayhoff. And his whole coaching ministry, he does evangelism training too. And his thing is that the church has been plagued because all we ever do is we listen to respond.
Oh.
We just listen enough so that we know what response we're going to give. And instead, we need to listen to hear.
Mm.
The point of listening is that you would hear someone,
Right.
not that you would respond to them. And listening
Yeah.
to hear is, what is the cry of their soul? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? How are they processing these things? And I think one of the reasons why, I don't know, why it's more difficult with family, this is true in marriage and in parenting, but in siblings too, is that I think that the family bond is so close.
Mm.
And whether you're close or not, if you're not close, it's because you've messed it up. And I've messed it up. So I'm not throwing stones at anybody else that's going to listen to this. But I think that family, I don't know, I'm arguing with myself even before I say this, but I'm going to say it anyways because I think it's true. I think it's true, even though I can't fully defend it yet. But I think that family is designed by God to be a place of safety and understanding.
Mm.
I think that's what it's for. And I think that when family relationships become training relationships,
Oh.
I think that when you want someone else to change in any way, even if they're asking you for help, it's so easy for whatever the process is of growing to become a condemning standard if you're not meeting the standard, or if you're not making progress enough or moving quickly enough or
Yeah.
whatever. That I don't think that family relationships are designed to be able to include disappointment or shame. My kids are 25 to 18. So my kids are older, right? They're all adults now. And so, and I do think that more care and obviously you go from being caretaker to cop to coach to consultant. There's this, as the kids get older, you have to give them more and more freedom, right? And so when they're younger, you really do have to guide and direct them, tell them what to think, but hopefully teach them how to think. And then as they grow up, you give them more and more. Well, as they grow up, you honor their agency more and more. And you don't want to just have them have no agency as they grow up, but you want their agency to grow up commensurate with their age and their level of maturity, right?
Right.
And so, but by the time they're adults, you probably just want to focus on honoring their agency. But all these things are overlapping, because all these things are, I think, just encouragements to us, especially as we're dealing with adults, to be curious about them, to learn more about, because everybody does things for a reason.
Yeah.
No one is irrational. It's just that they are irrational to you.
My first thought was politics, but that's a whole nother can of worms.
Well, politics is a perfect example of this, Pat, because politics, I mean, to be horribly simplistic, because that's all that politics really is horribly simplistic summaries of unbelievably complicated things that nobody actually has definitive proof that their side is 100% the right answer. But But politics are two different sets of values
Mm.
looking at the same reality. And
Yeah.
so to me, the right and the left in our country are incredibly rational. Not that every person who represents them sounds rational, but there are rational reasons and there are value structures that are very different on both sides of the political aisle that
Right.
govern and determine what people do and how they decide and what they think. And there's a beautiful TED Talk by Jonathan Haidt. It's called the moral roots of conservatism and liberalism. And yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah, you can go, it's 18 minutes. So go listen. But I mean, he basically just says that he's the one who taught me this about politics. And I mean, it's amazing because he says that if you asked 100 people their reaction to the statue David, Michelangelo's David,
Okay.
that their reaction, based on their reaction, you could predict if they voted for George Bush or Al Gore in the 2000 election
Really?
to an 80% accuracy.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So, and it's because of values.
Right.
Conservative people look at a statue of a naked man and they think certain things. Liberals look at a statue of a naked man, they think different things.
Hmm.
And they're both seeing true things.
Wow. Okay. That sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, they're both seeing things that are true.
Right.
It's just the different things that they value.
Mm.
And so, I mean, so part of the curiosity piece, part of the honoring people's agency piece is saying, look, I'm going to choose to respect you.
Mm.
I'm going to choose to believe that you, from my perspective, that you're made in God's image and you might even be redeemed by his spirit. And God is active and alive in you, whether you're Christian or not. You are worth understanding. You are, and I want to honor who you are as a person.
Mm.
And so I want to know the pathway that you're on, because even if I disagree with you, you're going to make a lot more sense to me if I've done the work of understanding where you're coming from. I'm actually to be blamed for a lot of the darkness that's emerged from my kids and my wife because they've suffered underneath my, but they're also seeing, and by God's grace, they've named that they've seen the difference and the change in me over the last 6 years or so. And so there's good that's come out of it. But what this does is this really does free me, where I don't have to be anxious about decisions that other people are making because they're their decisions to make.
I thought it was interesting you brought up, you said your kids are 25 and 18.
25, 23, 21,
Okay.
and 18.
Oh, okay. Got it. So
Yeah.
I'm 24 and I always like to think through my conversations on the podcast with the implications on the next generation. And I remember at UCLA one time I took a food studies class, I think what it was. We were just talking about where do we get our food, the evolution of the food industry. And we had a guy come in and talk, and he was probably in his mid 70s. And he didn't talk about food at all. He was supposed to be this expert in the industry. And he just talked to us about how much he is learning from our generation. And he spent 45 minutes. I forgot how long his lecture was at the time, 50 minutes, just talking about, he just kept saying, I need you guys to teach me. I need you to let me know when I'm not listening. And he said, there are so many perks to technology and apps on your phone. And he was like, whenever I meet a young person now, I ask them, how do I do this? How do I, how do I learn from you guys? And I find that, the posture that you're doing your best to hold and the perspective that you have of being curious, I just want to say, I guess, as a 24-year-old, has done so much to heal our generation and to help us moving forward. Because in, I think, all areas of Gen Z and right now, there is this push of we need a voice, we need to have a voice and those kinds of things. And I get it. I understand where that's coming from. But I think that's also a result of both not listening or we're not being heard. So I just want to say I appreciate that. It's really encouraging to hear.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for saying that. And I completely agree with you that I think that every generation struggles with the generation above them and below them, right? And I mean, even in the church world, that there's people that there's just these dynamics that happen. And it's because, well, there's a way that we do things, and this is how we do things. And then It's sort of, I've heard that the first generation understands the why and the what we do and why we do it. The second generation just understands the what we do and they lose the why. And
Oh,
so by the
okay.
third generation, they're like, what the heck are we doing here? Like, what's the point? They don't care about the what or the why
I
because
haven't
there's
heard
no
that.
why there.
Huh.
Yeah. And I think that constantly it is on the adults to humble themselves and to go first, to listen to the young people,
Hmm.
even though the young people should shut up and listen, and hear the wisdom of people that have lived longer and gone through things.
Yeah.
But I think the way, yeah, that when older people can get to the place that and have the humility and that space that professor that lectured had, where, and again, like, there is so much richness in the world that we
Hmm.
have that is just untapped.
Hmm.
And I am on a journey to be able to see people the way God does.
Hmm.
I want to see people the way that he sees them. I want to see what he sees. And so one of the ways that I've learned to formulate that is that I want to see people as they are, good, bad, and ugly, because we're all good, bad, and ugly all at the same time. Right. And so I want to see them as they are. I want to celebrate what's good and I want to serve what's bad.
Hmm.
And I think that for me has just grown more and more significant in my efforts to try to honor people's agencies and to be curious about the paths that they're on and who they are, is to see them, to celebrate anything that I possibly can that's good.
Hmm. That's good. My last question would just be if there's anything else that you wanted to share about your journey, maybe where you feel you're heading next or currently still trying to wrestle through.
It can be really, really difficult to honor people's agency
Hmm.
because it means honoring people's decisions to do very destructive things, to do things that really hurt me, hurt
Hmm.
others, hurt themselves. So it's through pain that I've come to understand how important this is.
Hmm.
And it's not an answer that will all of a sudden make all of your problems go away. While you do experience freedom and with a healthy boundary where you're not codependent in a sense on what other people do, you're not free from suffering with the decisions that get made.
Right.
And so, and I really struggled with that for a long time. And I just, and in part it was because I had a wrong view of God. I thought that if God was working and he was in control and he was over and reigning over all things, then, and his plan to save people and his plan to bring about his good purposes for everything, if those things were moving forward, then I shouldn't feel bad
Hmm.
because I should just be with God up in his heavenly plan and watching that come to fruition. And I should not be affected by the problems and the pain and the suffering of this world, right? Because God's plan's still happening. And as long as no one can thwart that plan, then I could be happy all the time. And you can do that until you can't.
Hmm.
Sometimes the pain is just so much that reality hits and you realize that you weren't living in reality. But then in addition to that, the more I've actually come close to God as he reveals himself in the Bible, the more I've learned that even though God is intimately at work in the world and he is bringing about good in a lot of situations, God is emotionally distraught over a lot of the pain and the brokenness in the world.
Hmm.
And so the God I was trying to be with in my constant joy in every circumstance kind of thing, he wasn't even there.
Right.
He was down suffering and grieved and in pain and in anguish and in tears with the people who were suffering. And I needed to learn to join him in that.
Hmm.
And that even though God doesn't say, well, you guys suck. I'm gonna honor your agency, but it's washing my hands of your mess. That's on you guys. That's just not the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible is ever present and is present even when we have pushed him away. He's still standing, waiting for us to invite him back in. And he doesn't say, I told you so. He just says, hey, how can I help? This is a mess. It's going to take time, but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And to see God, I guess I learned to see that God actually honors our agency. And that really helped me, because I felt I was now following God, who revealed himself in Jesus, who comes and is willing to allow us to do whatever it is that we want to do, and then to respond to us in love and grace and an invitation. And so for me, this is deeply a part of my own relationship with God, and it's been an incredible journey, because I feel I've gotten to know him better in this whole process too.
Yeah. It's been a common theme through many of the episodes where someone's story does come down to the way that they see God. And I think, every time I hear more stories, it solidifies more and more. I realize how much my relationship with others, with myself, it all comes down to whether I see God as loving or controlling. And
wow,
that's really good.
Wow. Yeah, A.W. Tozer, in the book The Knowledge of the Holy, he has 2 lines. The first one is that what we think about God is the most important thing about us. And then the second thing is that he says, we all unconsciously gravitate to become the image that we have of God.
I felt like we covered everything. Literally everything and more.
Yeah. This has been a journey.
Thank you so much for sharing, for being curious. I appreciate your time and all that you do.
Well, thank you for the conversation, Pat. Thanks for your podcast as an exercise in curiosity. And so, I very much value the service that you're doing by having these conversations and by seeing the people that you interview.
Thanks for listening to this episode. As always, if you haven't subscribed or rated the episode, feel free to do so, whether you're on Spotify, Apple, or whatever platform you're using. Also, if you haven't already, please follow I Used to Think Podcast on Instagram, where you'll see clips of previous episodes, as well as sneak peeks into future episodes. Until next time, peace.